Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru. And welcome to Chapter 12, Part 7 of Autobiography of a Yogi. We have the full team in today. What a joy. We've got Priyank, Chris, Mike, and myself. Are we ready to dive in?
Ready.
Oh,
So ready.
Listos.
Listos. We're ready. Okay. So we are in the moment of Guruji and Sri Yukteswar together. And we have a moment of slightly restless Mukunda here. So we begin by with the line, "My guru was a peerless interpreter of the scriptures." There's quite a line to start off. It's a very bold statement, isn't it? And Guruji says that, you know, he was very happy to be sort of listening to his discourses, and that, you know, he says his jeweled thoughts were not cast into the ashes of heedlessness or stupidity. And it just reminded me of, you know, Sri Yukteswar really knows where to place wisdom and not to put it on the ears of the unready.
What precisely do you think that means? So just say you just think that it's his thoughts were not cast into the ashes of heedlessness or stupidity. Why ashes? What does that mean? I'm struggling what that means.
I guess ashes is kind of like the dust and the dregs of something that's, you know, once been. It's like kind of dirt in a way, isn't it?
So you're saying if he did, so Fan's saying if he did not waste his breath on those that did not pay attention, or
yeah,
okay,
yeah. I mean, I can't say for certain, but that's what it feels like.
I think that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Then Guruji says, you know, even if he was restless a tiny amount, if he just, you know, had a little restless movement in his body or his mind wandered slightly, it would, you know, put an abrupt end to the exposition that Sri Yukteswar was speaking. That's quite severe, isn't it? You know.
Indeed, I can sympathize. Restlessness is my middle name. But I can, certainly sympathize, because it's quite hard, isn't it, to stay with whatever you're doing 100%, because it would appear that even if you drop to 99% concentration, Sri Yukteswar will be on top of you.
I heard a separate story years ago when I first started, reading into yoga and meditation and things. I heard a story really, Buddhist monks, they would have like long sticks, so that if you were to even move slightly in meditation, you get a whack. So, it's not, this kind of rigidness and strictness isn't just reserved for Sri Yukteswar's like lineage and style. I think it's quite a common thing, because it is essentially what you need in order to excel, is this rigidity in some sense, concentration.
Would you advocate for this, Chris, in meditation practice?
I think we talked about it before, what styles we actually would refer to if we could have somebody in our lives to kind of help us on the path. And definitely discipline is something I would welcome, because I'm a bit laissez-faire in my approach. So yeah, I would welcome it strongly, Mike. I'll welcome the pain.
Okay.
Bring on the punishment.
So you're pro corporal punishment then, Chris? I've noted
Personally
that.
speaking, for other people, it's different.
You know, this restlessness thing, Lauren. This last weekend we had our Kirtan event. Last 10 days ago or something, Easter Kirtan we had, and my younger brother-in-law was in the audience, and we were performing the Kirtan, and he was like, someone was making a lot of like rustling sounds and crackling their knuckles, all that kind of stuff. So during one of the meditations, I opened my eyes and it was him, and you both know Mike, you know Nimish, and his mum was sitting next to him, and afterwards she like really yelled at him for not being able to sit still for 5 minutes. I was like, this is, and he's not young, people. He's like nearly 30 now, so it's there's a different attitude, isn't it, to parenting in terms of what constitutes for telling off and what doesn't. You can imagine other parents wouldn't really mind about this.
You know, if you were to think about the times whenever you've spoken to non-yogis, what is the feedback that they give you as to why they struggle with meditation? Whenever I think about it now, one of the number one things is like, oh, I just can't sit still. I just couldn't sit still for that length of time, for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes, let alone for 3 hours or 6 hours sometimes, you know, when we're doing longer meditations. And it's a very, very common issue, isn't it? This restlessness, this bodily movement is extremely common when I think about it. The people that have talked to me about it, when they say they struggle, it's this issue.
I think one thing that pushes us completely in the different direction, in the opposite direction, is multitasking. And I feel like that's something we're doing a lot when we are at work, or when we are, I don't know how you guys are when you are in a work meeting, but I oftentimes look at my chats that are on and see if I can answer something there, or I read emails while I feel like there's something going on that's not really that important. And really focusing 100% on something is like, it also puts you in this, in like, I feel like sometimes it's already baked in. I know I'm gonna be in a place where I am supposed to listen, but I also know I can do other things at the same time. Once you put 100% of attention on it, then you would really think, why am I even here? Why am I even listening to this? Is this really worth my time here? And there's almost like when you sit in front of Sri Yukteswar, then that's amazing, right? Then you have this guru in front of you. But I feel like everything else in our world hardly ever is like that situation. So that's why when you meditate, you're supposed to have that same concentration, right? And restlessness, and is your enemy. So you really have to be like completely the opposite of what you are in the world usually. Do you guys agree with that, or do you think actually one should be in the world the same way, just be always focused on the person in front of you 100%?
Good approach. No, I might have to implement some of that. Answering Chris's question, I always get I'll get so, don't you get bored? I'd get so bored just sitting and doing nothing. And I must admit, I sometimes fear that I'm gonna get bored during a meditation. Like my weekend routine sometimes is like 3 or 4 hours in terms of my practices, and that includes like reading and things like that. And like by the time like I start, I'm thinking, oh gosh, I've got a long haul here. Am I going to get bored? And the way I kind of tackle it is to think that boredom is a relative experience, isn't it? So, and we should be above relative experiences. So one person may be bored during a meditation, another person may be like absolutely having a flying time. You know, one person may be bored watching a TV show, and the other person watching that same TV show may be like enjoying it. So it's completely relative. So we should be away from, you know, we should conquer those kind of dualities of our experience. That's my thinking anyway. So I always try and tackle that that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm going to get bored, especially for an all-day meditation or a weekend retreat of meditating.
Yeah, it's funny, the relativism really impacts the perspective on meditation, because I only ever get that before or just at the very end of a meditation, never really during. So whenever I'm in I'm doing my practice, I'm, you know, absorbed in it. But then if I know, oh, you know, it's 9 o'clock, we're leaving soon, then I'll start to go, okay, so where, what train do I need to get, where do I need to be? And then you start sort of getting a bit agitated, a bit restless. So it's only whenever you kind of pull back into it. But if we didn't have all these things kind of dragging our attention away, maybe, yeah, it would be a lot easier. But to Mike's point, Yogananda himself talked about this quite a bit in terms of being able to put your attention on one thing and having flexibility of the mind, and then no matter what it is, give it 100% attention. So I would probably say to Mike, what your point is well taken. Sometimes if you put your attention on it, you might think, well, why am I doing this? Or why am I listening? Why am I here? But then Yogananda himself says, no matter what it is, give it 100% attention. And then I suppose you'll be like a superhuman skill compared to many other people, because it's probably a rare quality.
I feel like restlessness is such a common theme, isn't it, for everyone who meditates at some point, unless you're, super advanced and you've transcended restlessness, but at some point you'd have experienced it as well. And it's talked about a lot, especially in the Gita, and it talks about restlessness, and it says that identification of the consciousness with the alternating waves of change is known as restlessness. Identity with changelessness is calmness. The conquest of the soul's calmness over the ego's restlessness advances in 4 stages. 1, always restless and never calm. 2, part of the time restless and part of the time calm. 3, most of the time calm, occasionally restless. And 4, always calm, never restless. I'd love to be in 4. I don't know about you.
I was going to say, everybody has to pick.
I'm glad you didn't ask us how we would grade ourselves. Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
But
I was going to.
Go on, everyone. Everyone,
No.
give yourself, go on the scale. Mike, you're first. Where are you? 1 to 4. 1 to 4.
Put it in the chat at the same time on 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, maybe I would be a 1.5.
I was going to do a decimal point as well. I'd say 2.1.
2.1.
Nice. Yeah, I'd go for 2. But then also it depends on the day, doesn't it? It's like some days I feel very calm and concentrated and, a bit restless, but not as much. But then other days it's like on the Battle of Kurukshetra, here I am. What about you, Chris?
If I was to actually rate others, say if I was to rate you guys, I would actually give you very high ratings. But interestingly, a comment from somebody in the SRF group a few years back even said to me, like, I do look very calm. They made a comment, something about this, I look very calm control, but then they said, but actually your mind's restless. And they made a comment years ago, and they were bang on the money. Like it was harsh but true. And they said it very, very nicely. It wasn't in like taken badly or anything, but it just shows like sometimes the perception of someone, and if they're calm and not restless versus what's going on underneath in the mind, the body and the mind, the different separate things. So we could maybe kid other people, but not our inner self or God.
So what are you scoring yourself, Chris? We've all scored ourselves.
Yeah, I'm keeping that to myself, I think.
Come on.
It'd be a lower decimal point, I think. Probably a 1 point something.
Oh no.
Yeah.
More work to be done, but that's all part of the fun, isn't it?
Can't believe that person said that to you. I think for a meditator, that's such a barbed comment, isn't it? And anywhere else in the world, oh yeah, thanks. Brush it off.
But it's true, you can sit very still but still be inwardly restless, because I was just visiting my parents for a few days, and my mom was asking me about my meditation, and she asked me how long I normally meditate for. So I told her, and she's like, wow, that's really disciplined. And I was thinking, yeah, it is, but also just because you're there meditating for that long doesn't mean you're actually meditating for that long and you've remained concentrated, or you're not restless, or all of those things. But the main part is that we try, isn't it? Try our best.
I think the first thing that meditation does is it gives you some self-awareness of how restless you actually are. So that's why I think people who never try to go within, they might not be aware that they are actually super restless. And then once you try to be like still and calm for like hours at a time, and then you're suddenly trying to wrestle down your mind, then it becomes more. I think that's why that we grade ourselves like that. Otherwise, we would have maybe gone, oh yeah, I feel very calm today.
Such a common question, isn't it? From lay people when they say, "How long do you meditate for?" Isn't it?
Yeah.
There's so many. From our perspective, there's so many better questions you could be asked, isn't there? That's like the most common one, and that's why it's like really important to have a good answer for that. So like if you didn't meditate for the past 3 days, and then they ask how long do you meditate for, and then you say I haven't meditated for 3 days, they were like, why are we even having this? Why are you even speaking about meditation?
Yeah.
They may
Why
not
are you
say
here?
that. They may not say that.
Silence. Yeah. Oh my God.
But on the subject of restlessness and this Gita reading, they explain each of the 4 categories. And this might actually give you some hope, Chris, on your lower score, that actually maybe you're not as low as we think. So it might be nice to read them out. Would you like to start, Mike?
Number 1, under the control of ego, the characteristic state of the bodily kingdom is restlessness. With restlessness comes the eclipse of discrimination, buddhi. The sense mind, manas, under complete control of ego and desire, makes no effort to fight evil and to bring back the noble general calmness as the protector of the fortress of life. The mind, therefore, suffers from continuous restlessness, inefficiency, and ignorance.
Number 2. In the second stage of the psychological battle, King Soul occasionally attains a temporary victory in the enemy kingdom of restlessness and ignorance. This stage is reached when calmness makes long, strenuous efforts to bombard the ramparts of restlessness. His guns are the regularly repeated, continuous sieges of months of deep meditation. In the state, the bodily kingdom is still infested with restlessness, broken occasionally by calmness.
In the third stage of psychological battle, General Calmness and his soldiers, by repeated invasions with the big guns of deep and continuous higher meditation, are able to advance significantly further into the territory occupied by restlessness. The glorious result of this battle is made known by a state of prolonged peace. The bodily kingdom experiences only occasional outbreaks from the rebels of restlessness.
In the fourth stage of the psychological battle, King Ego and all his soldiers are completely routed. The peaceful kingdom of King Soul is forever established as the empire of life.
And you'll remember, if you flick through God Talks with Arjuna, you'll remember in the beginning parts, in the first 100 pages, there's a very long section. This is part of the long section, but there's 2 pictures. There's a meditating yogi that's ruled by King Ego, and all the qualities that he, goes through. And then there's a meditating yogi that's ruled by a King Soul, and then there's all the qualities that inhibit that yogi.
And it's also quite oh yeah, go on, Chris.
Just a anecdotal, I like the comments on war here. It's very war oriented, right? It's like guns and, you know, making up territory. And, you know, often we've joked about shying away from puns that might be related to, you know, violence and things like this. But the Bhagavad Gita in and of itself is, you know, a story on war, right? Like a war. And that's essentially, I remember reading with Guruji saying about Satan, and essentially that we need to give the devil its due and know that we're up against like an enemy of sorts. And this kind of talk actually gears my mind into the readiness and the focus that we have to have in this war, you know, the in this analogy. So yeah, it's nice just reading through this, because it for me is relatable.
Very relatable, and even relatable for Guruji when he was a young Mukunda, because, you know, he was sitting there with Sri Yukteswar and he became slightly restless, and Sri Yukteswar picked up on that, and he said, much like that person did to you, "You're not here," you know. And Guruji started to protest, and he said, "You know, I haven't stirred, my eyelids haven't moved, and I can repeat each word that you've uttered." But that didn't matter to Sri Yukteswar, because he said, "Well, you know, you're still not fully with me." And I love this bit. He says, "Your objection forces me to remark that in your mental background, you are creating 3 institutions. One was a Sylvian retreat on a plain, another on a hilltop, still another by the ocean."
The force there, he forces him. So Sri Yukteswar, like, he has to prove that he wasn't revealing the truth by reading his mind, because obviously Mukunda was satisfied that his attention only dropped from 100 to maybe 99%, and he was picturing these other, you know, prophetic visions. So but Sri Yukteswar could obviously see through that, and he had to prove to him that you've gone down to 99, you're not at 100%.
Yeah. And it just goes to show that actually, if we're listening to a truth, we do really need to be 100% concentrated to fully absorb it. And even that's quite a task, isn't it? And, you know, Guruji says about these 3 thoughts, he said that, you know, there was almost subconscious. And, you know, he says, "Well, you know, what can I do?" And you're, you know, penetrating my random musings. So, you know, even Guruji didn't think, "Oh yeah, it's a vision. I'm thinking, I'm sort of planning." It's in the background. It's like a random musings. And Sri Yukteswar comes back, "You know, you've given me that right. And subtle truths I am expounding cannot be grasped without your complete concentration." And then, you know, he goes on to say that he doesn't invade other people's thoughts unless it's absolutely necessary. Yeah, Chris.
Actually, I was just going to ask you what you guys think on this, because it said you have given me that right. And when Guruji really said in previous in an earlier part of this chapter, like he was going to commit to him and submit to him entirely, was that what he's referencing to here? Essentially, that meant a holistic, the whole shebang. You know, you can kind of read my thoughts, and you'll know every aspect of me, so that you can mold me in the way that you need to. So that might have been the, you know, you need to read the fine print kind of you know, comment to that. Otherwise, you know, I've heard that God doesn't necessarily penetrate our thoughts always unless we talk to God, which is something I've maybe struggled with kind of understanding, because God knows our every need, but then doesn't necessarily go into our thoughts unless we actually reach out to God. So 2 things, like, well, 1, that's just amazing that we may have privacy that way, but 2, that we have to actually reach out and talk to God. We actually have to do the proactiveness aspect of it. So it's not to take this for granted. Otherwise, Sri Yukteswar wouldn't have known what was going on in Guruji's mind unless we fully submit.
Yeah, I think it's very like not intrusive, right? Like I feel like an avatar could read anyone's thoughts all the time, but they don't do it probably out of courtesy more than anything else. They just hold back.
Mm.
I remember someone at the center, her husband belongs to a different lineage of gurus, and that guru was at her house, and they were welcoming him for a program, and she was telling me, the assessor afterwards, she was telling me, oh, I don't like to sit with him, and I was like, why is that? He's like, because he can read my mind.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, when you've got that level of consciousness, it goes without saying, doesn't it? But it's very comforting to know that, you know, the saints don't, like Sri Yukteswar, don't go there unless absolutely necessary. But yeah, a bit like you, Chris, I was a bit taken aback when he says, you know, the unbidden Lord does not enter there, neither do I venture intrusion. I thought, well, yeah, I thought God knows my every thought, right? My every being, because we are him, right? But apparently not so. So yeah, that did throw me off a bit. But Guruji says some quite lovely and useful things about concentration, which I thought might just be nice to get his consciousness on it. Chris, would you like to read the first one?
Concentration is a state of complete one-pointedness and stillness of consciousness. The nature of creation is motion. The nature of spirit is motionless. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46:10. Concentration is therefore essential to divine communion.
Mike, could you please read the next one?
To be able to concentrate is essential for spiritual progress. Without concentration, you shall never find God. All right.
A daunting prospect.
We're done. Good game, Mike.
I forfeit, yeah.
Yeah, that certainly blew the wind in my sails when I read that. I was like, oh, okay then. Well, there's work to be done.
But then
so,
isn't that kind of true for everything in life? That if you cannot really concentrate on your goal, then you will never reach them, or it will be much more difficult. So I don't think it's something that's unique to spiritual progress. I think concentration is the ability of yourself to manifest your life and everything in it that you want to manifest.
Yeah, definitely. I was speaking to another devotee. I was actually on the Kirtan day, and we were talking about this. And you know, I remarked that it's very kind of difficult sometimes in work, because it's such an absorbing job that I find myself very concentrated on the job. But then I remember, oh, I haven't thought about God in a while, right? And you know, he reminded me. He said, well, if you know, he said that he'd heard somewhere that how we live day-to-day life is more or less how we meditate. So if we're quite concentrated in our work, that's okay, because it means that we're more than likely to take that level of concentration to meditation, which is very wise. Not quite true for me, but I wish I was that absorbed always in meditation. But yeah, Priyanik.
Also, that applies for perhaps serving at the center, because I'm in this state where I don't consider my job as different to what I serve, how I serve at the center, and a lot of that is because there's a bit of blurring of the boundaries, because I'm in charge of maintenance and I work in maintenance in my company, so there's a kind of a then I, you know, the more senior devotees were they really good at showing the example of this, like if they're halfway into doing something, or even if something isn't being done properly, they just remember, remind themselves of God and gurus, and kind of just take the time out and sit in the stillness, and to speak with a person about about what they're going through, rather than just finishing what they're doing, because it's much more important than a mundane conversation. But because we're not there to like fix a light or like fix a leak, we're there to serve God and gurus, right? And that's something that I need to work on.
I was wondering what you guys thought about concentration being so important. Where did we learn it growing up? You know, is it just a sort of a natural tendency, like you say, Lauren, if you were applying yourself to work, or say if you were reading a book, you might be fully concentrated if you were absorbed or enjoyed it. But we don't, from my knowledge, really teach it as a skill, even though it's like such an incredible skill, like a superhuman skill to have. So I wondered, you know, what did Guruji say on it? Because I think he had plenty of ways of saying how we can improve on it. And he said principally, I think the self-realization technique of concentration is uniquely scientific because it teaches students how to reinforce the power of the human mind and the supercharged concentrated consciousness of God. And that includes, I believe, then the energization exercises, the Hong Saw, you know, all the techniques, right? So that would be really useful to learn in school when you're young, right? As opposed to later on in life.
On a very simple level, to answer your question, on simple level, I was very good at concentrating without working on it. And then obviously that's nothing compared to how good you need to be good at, you know, meditation and self-realization. But I never worked on it. So in that sense, and I noticed that I could do it better than most of my peers. So in that sense, it must have been something that I've developed from a previous incarnation, and a quality that has rolled over into this present life, which gives us some comfort for all of our, you know, successes. Even though we may not ultimately be successful, we'll still carry the fruits into our next round, if there is another round.
For me, that's something I struggled with early on, and I felt maybe that's one reason why I went into computer science when I went to college, because I first started studying business, and I noticed that studying business was reading really large books and then being tested on their content, and that was just really not playing to my strength. And in engineering, it's more like you read a bit, you do a bit, you read a bit, you do a bit, and that was much easier. This kept me entertained. And one other thing that I learned to concentrate on early on was sports, because it was competitive, and it just comes with this motivation. Like if it was soccer or tennis or ping pong, or all of those really require you to be very focused, otherwise you're going to lose, and that's what you don't want.
Yeah, and I feel like
football.
Chris says football is correcting.
Yeah. I've been in the US for too long.
But I wonder if, like, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I do wonder if concentration is directly linked to love. You know, when we really love something that we're doing, for example, we are in the zone. You know, like I remember, you know, back when, or even now, if I'm playing music or writing songs, or, you know, I'm in that kind of creative place, and I love creativity. I'm concentrated. There's nothing that's coming in this sort of zone of concentration apart from what I'm doing. And, you know, I can miss meals, and because I'm just there, right? And I wonder if it's linked to that sense of like pure love and enjoyment, because, you know, even in those moments, like in our own meditations, you know, when it's like really lovely, and you know, you're there, you're absorbed, right? Even if it's just for however long, because we're enjoying it and we love being there. And it's kind of perhaps when we're not so in love with it, or I don't know. It's just a kind of thought. What do you think, Chris?
I suppose my take is that it definitely helps, for sure.
Yeah.
But time flies when you're having fun, and I think if you're concentrated on something, time flies. So there's probably a link there somewhere. But Guruji says, there is a quote here: to develop one's powers of concentration, one should do everything with deep attention. Most people perform activities absent-mindedly. There is a great gulf between their actions and their thoughts. So really what I take from that is that it shouldn't matter what we're doing. We should perform it with absolute concentration. So yeah, regardless whether you love it or not, doing the dishes, maybe doing something. That's what Guruji says.
Yeah. Well, we can't argue with that, right? Irrefutable truths. So back to Guruji and Sri Yukteswar. So Sri Yukteswar says that your architectural dreams will materialize later, and now is the time for study. So he really gave a glimpse of the future in just that one line, in a very simple and honest yet not overly exuberant way that Sri Yukteswar seems to have when he gives his prophecies. And Guruji says that this was knowledge of three very important events in his life. And he says, since he was young, he had these glimpses of these buildings, and in that exact sequence that Sri Yukteswar spoke of, the Sylvian on a plane and all of that, they each came true in that order. So the first was Ranchi, and then you had Mother Center, or international headquarters, and then Encinitas, which overlooks the sea. And I went into a bit of a deep dive on the history of all these buildings, because I found it really interesting. And I won't go into it fully, because a lot of it is actually in the autobiography. And, when we get there, we'll go more deep into it. But I love the beginning of how Ranchi came to be. So basically, Guruji, he was really sort of encouraged by Sri Yukteswar to start these schools, right? So he had two boys already who were in his ashram in Kolkata, and then he founded a Brahma school called Brahmacharya Vidyalaya in 1917, and he had 7 boys, and basically it grew and grew. And the Maharaja was then very enthusiastic about Guruji's work, so he actually funded a lot of his ashrams and his work. So in 1918 he gave him his summer palace with these 25-acre grounds, and the school relocated to Ranchi, and that's how it came to be. And what I particularly loved to read was that as time went on, we fast forward to 1968, and he had 1,400 boys around about, and 400 girls enrolled in the YSS high schools, and 800 students in its colleges. I was very surprised to read about girls being in the schools. I kind of didn't enter my thought, but so it's quite interesting, well, to me at least, how that came to be, and it does go into it more later on in the autobiography.
Yeah, there's about 10, maybe 15 schools now all across India that that spanned out. So yeah, it's still growing.
Yeah, and it will continue to, won't it? And then we have the Mother Center, of course, which was actually called the International Headquarters, and that was built in 1909, and then he dedicated it in 1925. And it was listed as a historical cultural monument in Los Angeles in 2006. And again, there's a lot more on it in the chat in the book, so I'm not going to delve in too much. But I was reading God Alone, and I found something quite interesting in there. And it said, in 1935, Paramahansa returned to India for a last visit with his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar. Before leaving, he demonstrated complete trust in Gyanamata by placing her in charge of the Mount Washington headquarters. I'm so happy, he wrote to her, to feel I can send devotees safely to one who helps them and inspires them with my ideal. I cannot tell you what a relief it has been since you have been there. It was so beautiful. It was actually the first time that I'd read that Gyanamata was in charge of Mount Washington. I never knew that before. And, you know, there's such a wonderful energy in Mother Center. I think we've all been, haven't we now? No? Chris, not yet?
I booked it during, I think, 2020 when COVID struck, and then I haven't been able to get back. So soon, for sure. One day.
Yeah.
One day soon.
Maybe that was an accidental prophecy, Chris. No, I'm not that advanced. But yeah, it's a really beautiful place, and it has such strong vibrations. And Guruji says a couple of things about Mother Center. Would you like to read it, Chris?
Mm-hmm. The dreams I have had and have worked for, God has fulfilled, and much more than I had planned. It is because Mount Washington Center has always striven to be the instrument of God that those plans have been realized. Paramahansa Yogananda. That's actually something that's been on my mind. Is I think if you're in tune with God and act as that instrument, everything comes more free flowing, smoothly. So I think sometimes you go against the grain and things don't work out. I struggle between the two of these philosophies, because should you work really hard and strive and, you know, work hard for something in life, or should life come free flowing and, you know, in the flow of God's plan? I'm not quite clear on which one you really should be, but I know Guruji he had to fight hard. We know from studying his life that it was not easy to do what he did, but still it was fulfilled ultimately. So both may be true.
Yeah.
Be necessary.
Priyank, what else does Guruji say about the grounds?
On these grounds, I have so meditated and loved God that whoever walks through these gates with a receptive heart will be changed.
Did you feel that, Priyank, when you went?
Most
what about
certainly.
you, Mike? Mike,
every time I go there, I'm changed.
Yeah.
A little bit. I think it's one of those places where when you go in, there is something that's like such a positive vibration. And right, like we might talk about the retrofit a little bit, and that they will build like a shrine there. But right now, when you go there, there's not really a good place to meditate except for in the Temple of Leaves. But that's just what you want. You go there and you just want to meditate because it has this vibration of drawing you within.
Yeah. I don't know if it was in Mother Center, but there was certainly somewhere I remember reading where Guruji said that he only ever talked positively in that place. So it was purposely filled with good vibrations. I think I read this in the Divine Romance. And, you know, wherever I seem to go in America, in the different, you know, sites, I could feel that. And, you know, he's so right. You are changed, aren't you? If you go in with your heart open, he'll fill it for you. It's really beautiful. So, Chris, you've got that to look forward to when you go.
I know. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come stay at yours, Mike, and, you know, crash in your sofa.
Anytime.
Yeah. And then, of course, he has his hermitage in Encinitas. Have you been there, Mike and Priyank? Mike has, Priyank hasn't. Oh, Priyank, you need to go. Chris, you need to go. It's, I mean, Mother Center is something, but Encinitas is, well, for me at least, a big wow. I spent, was it 5 days in Encinitas, and I managed to go to the gardens most days. And I remember I was sitting atop of it's like a hill kind of thing, and I was looking out onto the Pacific Ocean. I was sitting on this bench, and there was such a strong vibration there. I was like, oh. And someone walked past and they said, Guruji used to sit there. Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's got something. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, I could just put more Encinitas anecdotes in there. I got a few as well. But one time I went, and I was just going to a conference in San Diego, which was completely non-spiritual and stuff. And it was evening, and I was driving back to LA, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll stop by Encinitas. Maybe I can go to the gardens. It was around the time the gardens closed, so right when I parked in front of it, the gates closed. The guy was like, "No, you can't get it."
No.
And then I thought, and then I thought, yeah, but the sun is setting, and right next to it is like a lookout point. So I went there to look at the sun setting, and I went there. And I think there were like 10 people doing EEs, like energization exercise. That's the kind of town Encinitas is.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember before I went, I really wanted to go to this cafe. I had no idea why I wanted to go. It was called the Lotus Cafe or something.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, I'd really love to go there. I didn't know why. Anyway, so I went, and then I just see Guruji's picture right in the cafe, and it turns out that, you know, devotees run the cafe, and, you know, all of this, and it's just it just feels like Guruji's just everywhere there. So yeah, it's a beautiful place. I won't talk about how Encinitas came to be, because we do have a whole chapter on that, and it's such a journey. But yeah, so back to Sri Yukteswar. So Guruji says that Sri Yukteswar never was arrogant about his prophecies, and he didn't, you know, say, oh, you know, I think such and such will occur, or be quite bold in that. But, you know, he would hint and say, oh, you know, don't you think it might happen? And he said that his simple speech hid Vatic power, and there was no recanting, and neither did his slightly veiled predictions prove false.
And the fact that they are like veiled or like suggestive rather than this will happen, you will do this. It's so humble, isn't it, from such a statuesque avatar to be. It's inspiring, isn't it, that he can be so humble.
Yeah, but also it's, you know, I think it's important for people to live the journey. Like, you may know that something's going to happen, you may know what that's going to be, but to kind of eliminate the value of the lesson learned in that person experiencing that is a big thing. So to say, oh, you know, well, this is going to happen, and make it, you know, like an absolute bold statement, that it's quite a strong thing to do, and I don't think it should be done unless it's absolutely necessary, you know. So yeah, very, very wise from Sri Yukteswar. But yeah, and then Guruji tells us about Sri Yukteswar and, you know, what he was like. And I'll try not to read it out verbatim, but it's kind of hard not to, because it's just so specific. He said he was very reserved, he was matter of fact, and there was, you know, nothing. He wasn't kind of like a daft visionary, he wasn't vague about anything. And he said his feet were firm on the earth, his head in the haven of heaven. And I love that balance, right? It's just kind of really clearly saying, well, yeah, we're here on this earth, but also our head is with God, right? And apparently, you know, a lot of people admired Sri Yukteswar, especially if they were very practically minded, because, you know, he was feet on the earth and head in heaven. And Priya, would you like to read what he says?
No. Can someone else do that?
Okay, it says, saintliness is not dumbness. Divine perceptions are not incapacitating, he would say. The active expression of virtue gives rise to the keenest intelligence. Yeah, because I guess there's kind of a tendency to think, oh yeah, well, you know, if I'm really communing with God, then I'm not here, and you know, I'm kind of, I can't do things because I'm just, you know, at one. But he's saying, well, no, it's not incapacitating. You can still do everything, and still have those perceptions and that union, but without, and still do life, right? And Priyank, you found a reading of the Gita. That was hard to say. A reading about intelligence. Mike, would you like to read it?
To give some context, this
go on then.
This verse of the Gita asks, Arjuna asks, what's better, to essentially to do yoga, or to develop your wisdom and intelligence? And then Krishna answers, and then Guruji is explaining the answer.
And I'll just read it and then comment later. Even intellectually learned men are like uninstructed children if they see differences between the path of wisdom and the path of right action. The wise engage in activities. The doer of right actions is wise. Those who study the scriptures only intellectually make a distinction between the path of wisdom and the path of action. The true yogi sees no division between wisdom and right action. He who truly follows one path receives the benefits of both paths. The ecstatic union with inner wisdom, or the performance of divine and meditative actions, leads to the same plane, the perception of cosmic consciousness and cosmic bliss. The yogi who is immersed in wisdom and the yogi who performs action see two modes of salvation as one. They alone are the perceivers of truth. The Vedantic way of acquiring wisdom consists of listening to scriptural wisdom, explained by a self-realized guru, and meditating on it, perceiving its essence by becoming one with it. The far different theoretical method of learning scriptures does not produce real wisdom, merely imaginary ideas about it. There's like bombs dropped here. Yeah.
And SRF certainly take this to the depths of, don't they? Because whenever we have our Gita reading classes or lessons, group lessons reading, is essentially what we do. We read verse by verse or paragraph by paragraph, and then pause, meditate upon it, and then become hopefully one with it. Mike?
Yeah, because it's really not about memorizing the scriptures. It's really about taking what's in them and meditating on it, but also acting on it in your life. Learn like absorbing them rather than because if you memorize it, it's like you uploaded it into your memory, but that doesn't mean a fundamental change has happened, right, in your thinking. It just means you know of it. You haven't processed it yet. And Guruji even says if you just read too much wisdom at a time, then you will just overflow with the stuff and it won't really benefit you. It might even make you feel vain rather than learn the lessons of what you read.
Yeah, because I guess you can then go into kind of like a spiritual ego of thinking you know the truths and that you are living them, but actually you're just parroting them, right? And you know, we need to have that keen eye, don't we, to go, okay, well, what I'm saying, am I living that, or am I just saying it to kind of appear as if I know.
I'll throw a spanner into the works.
Oh, go on. We love a spanner.
Those two. So a few weeks ago, I did this course. It's called Guru Puja. I think I played part of it in one of our I recited part of it, and through the whole, we spent 3 days learning this mantra, which is about 2 or 3 pages long, and getting the pronunciation right, and not learning what it means, just memorizing it. And the reason for that, they said, if we show you what the translation is, then your imagination will go wild, and rather than focusing on the devotion aspect, you'll then go into what it means and the stories behind these people that you're reciting and all that kind of stuff. So, and then they said something really interesting. They said that Sanskrit is not a language that was created to attribute, things as we imagine language to be created, i.e. this is air, or it was the inverse. So it was a discovered language. So every form has a sound attached to it, and that sound they discovered was the word in Sanskrit. So then what we were doing in that Guru Puja was learning those words and memorizing them and then reciting them, and then regardless of whether we understood what they mean or not intellectually, it was manifesting because we were saying it as it was and as it is correctly supposed to be said. And that's why we spent 3 days memorizing it and learning it and saying it correctly. And similarly, so in Sanskrit, in the Bhagavad Gita, obviously it's a whole load of shlokas or Sanskrit verses, right? 18 chapters and many hundreds of verses. And many people just memorize the Sanskrit verses, and obviously they don't have an understanding of Sanskrit. But that doesn't mean that they're not benefiting, because Sanskrit, as we know, has a very profound impact on yourself and your meditation, and it links to mantra and things like that. So similarly with the Om vibration, you don't need to understand what Om means. You don't need to philosophize over Om. You can just chant Om and be one with Om, right? And similarly with all these Sanskrit shlokas. So that's a slight counter to the whole memorizing and thing, because there are other elements at play, especially with Sanskrit.
I was going to say Sanskrit is a whole different kettle of fish, really, isn't it? Because it's seed sounds, right? So go on, Mike. Yeah.
I was just going to ask if it works as well with German, but
it is. I mean, it's different for the actual languages, isn't it? If I was to recite the Gita in English, it probably does not have the same impact as reciting it in Sanskrit. That's my feeling. It may not be correct, but yeah, like
Guruji says that all the cosmic chants were especially blessed by him and by the gurus.
Spiritualized, he said, didn't he?
Spiritualized.
Yeah.
Spiritualized. So I don't know exactly how spiritualization works, but I feel that when you say those words, they, similar to Sanskrit mantras, they become mantras that are spiritually powerful.
Yeah, so I have a theory on that.
Oh, go on,
so he's got there's something called there's consecration. It's like a tantra. Tantra is like is when you manifest something. Is a tantra. So what if he said he spiritualized it? He's performing this very deep, very profound exercise to make something that like works as like a tool, as it were. So he spiritualized those cosmic chants, right? So if you hear the chant, even the for example, spirit and nature, Radha 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 Govinda Jai. That is a very common chant, right? In India, that's a one of the most common chants, but I don't think I've ever heard it as Guruji chants it. So the melody that he's used, I think, has got a lot of vibration power. So I think half the process is actually making sure you chant it in exactly the same way that Guruji has chanted it, and that's why and that's why they, we're as as harmonium, as chanters at the center, our head of music and Mother Center, the guidance they give is do not, under any circumstance, change the melody, not even change the tempo. She just sent a message just recently, actually, saying lots of people are varying various things of the chant. You need to make sure you read cosmic chants, understand the music, understand the tempo, and if you're going to change it, just change. Like if you're going to go slower, for example, only go slower at the very last 2 lines. Obviously, this doesn't apply for kirtans and other things like that, but for regular services, you have to do it as Guruji did it, as he transcribed it with the Western sheet music, and that's what we do, right? Every service you go to, it's rarely the chant and the melody is virtually exactly the same, and the emphasis for us who lead the chants is not to have a beautiful voice and to awe and inspire everyone with our voice, but it's to lead through devotion, right? So you may not have a great voice, but you can have great devotion, and that's what you want to lead the congregation into if you are a chanter, harmonium player for the center. So that's my 2 pennies worth on that. But
yeah, I mean, I think it actually says a lot of that in the front of the Cosmic Chants book. But although what it does say is that, in the midst of your devotion, if you are doing it purely devotionally and not for the sake of sounding pretty, if your voice naturally does a slight lilt in the note, or if you create like a little riff of some kind, but if it's coming from a devotional place, that's okay. But if you're kind of just trying to sound good, that's not okay. But I mean, it makes sense. It's been spiritualized, right? So and
we have to be careful, isn't it? Keep the teachings pure.
Yeah. And sorry if I've already said this in a podcast, but I was listening to Dayamata, and she said that when she first met Guruji, that he said that if you chant "Door of my heart," you will experience communion with God. Like if you really, really chant it. So she did. She went home and she chanted it inwardly for like 2 hours. She said, she was crying, and and then she said she did experience that peace of God that came over her. So they're very powerful if we really delve in. But yeah, back to the Gita. Priyak, would you like to carry on reading the rest of that?
God is wisdom and bliss. When wisdom is gained by the Vedantic way of meditation, it produces God realization. Similarly, when bliss is gained through the scientific methods and meditation techniques of yoga, it produces God realization. Thus, the sage first attains the wisdom aspect of God, while the yogi first attains his bliss aspect. When the wise man realizes as the sea of perceptions, the yogi feels as the ocean of eternal bliss. By a slow, circuitous, difficult path, the sage reaches the same divine goal that the yogi attains by the airplane route of self-realization. The wisdom path, Jnana Yoga, is long, dry, and hard. The yoga is short, easy, and strewn with perceptions of ever new bliss. Wisdom is not as impelling a force as divine bliss.
So, which path do you choose?
Most certainly the latter.
Yeah. Although this is a good route, particularly for me, because I've always felt kind of drawn to that kind of wisdom aspect, particularly in Sri
I can see it in your eyes.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, this just puts it right down, doesn't it? You know, go the airplane route, right?
But it's so cool. It's so cool that you don't neglect gaining wisdom through that path. It comes like hand in hand.
Yeah.
That's why I really like this reading.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously Sri Yukteswar and all of our gurus and param gurus, they all had that unity of both, right? And you know, Sri Yukteswar, he said about him that, you know, he had this kind of aura of perfect simplicity about him, and you know, he didn't discuss the supernatural realms. He didn't really talk about miracles, but he did actually operate them at will secretly. And he says that a man of realization does not perform any miracle until he receives an inward sanction. God does not wish the secrets of his creation revealed promiscuously. Also, every individual in the world has an inalienable right to his free will. A saint will not encroach on that independence. So there you go. It's quite something. It's almost kind of hard to comment on what he said. Yeah, great.
He's kind of doubled down on a saint will, you know, the free will, and a saint will not encroach on that on his independence. Because the previous couple of paragraphs we had before was that he doesn't enter, you know, the seclusions of others' minds. Even the Lord doesn't enter there. So these are now not just minds, but also our free will. It kind of seems to be linked. We have our freedom to think as we wish, regardless of our known or unknown ramifications of those thoughts.
Yeah, it's kind of, well, it's really respecting God's wish, isn't it, of us having our free will and exercising that. And you know, it's up to us if we use it to go home or to go further into delusion. It's up to us if we love him or not. It's completely our choice, right? And you know, I feel like a lot of these saints, they really realize that, and they don't encroach on that. But Priyank's been amazing at finding wonderful readings from the Gita for us.
I just happened to be reading them.
Well,
Guruji is the amazing person.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
So we have another one here that you found on free will. And Chris, would you like to read it for us, please?
Sure. So this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, verse 14. And it goes on the topic of free will. Even though the Lord is responsible for creating man and for placing him in cosmic delusion as present in nature, yet he is given his sons the power of free choice, either to yield to the harmful misery, making temptations of his physical impulses and environment, or to follow the inner guidance of wisdom flowing from God. The ordinary man takes the so-called easy path of catering to his impulses, a choice that ultimately leads to the destruction of all his happiness. But the yogi uses his God-given free will to follow the inner guidance of consciousness, of conscience and intuitive wisdom, and turns over to the government of his bodily city to God. Thus he regains his lost paradise. The devotee can always appeal to the Lord in deepest prayer and say, Heavenly Father, I did not wish to be created, nor did I wish to be placed in proximity to alluring evil temptations. Please, O God, since you created me and put me to the test of life without consulting me, bless me that I use my power of free choice to strengthen my will and to follow the path of freedom and not the path of delusion. The divine omnipresent consciousness of the Lord is aware of all men's prayers. He that planted the ear shall not. This is a funny one, sorry. He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? He that teacheth man knowledge, shall not he know?
Mm.
Beautiful reading that, yeah. Thanks, Brad.
I love that prayer. Oh my goodness.
Which one? There's two there.
Well,
Heavenly Father one.
yeah.
Really strong.
Just, that, bless me that I use my power of free choice to strengthen my will and to follow the path of freedom and not the path of delusion.
Also, we kind of got our answer also on previously when we were saying, we thought God could enter any part of his creation, even our thoughts. Here he said that the Lord is aware of all men's prayers. So anything that we offer to God as a prayer or otherwise, he is then aware of it. But other than that, it may be kept to yourself.
I hadn't read your comments here, Frank, because my comments earlier, I actually hadn't read this. So thank you, Frank, for answering my question before I even asked it. So via Guruji, of course.
Yeah. We also have a footnote here. When Sri Yukteswar talks about, God doesn't wish the secrets of his creation to be revealed promiscuously. It's from the Bible, it's from Matthew 7:6, and it says, "Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again to rend you." It goes along with that theme of, Sri Yukteswar knowing where wisdom is placed best, on whose ears it should fall. And Mike.
Yeah, I think there's like this balance between people are in this life, in this delusion, and you don't want to remove the curtain unless they really wanted to. And also, like he says here, you don't want to waste your wisdom to people who don't really care about it. So only receptive devotees, that's what it's meant for.
And also, I got that the pearls, i.e. your soul perceptions or your soul experiences, I consider those to be pearls as well, that you don't want to cast, give to the dogs. It's really harsh, isn't it, to the dogs? Don't give it unto the dogs, because obviously doesn't mean the literal dogs, does he? He means those that will trample on your soft heart without second or due consideration.
No, he means dogs, Priyank.
Or even just like those who aren't ready to receive that truth yet, and that's okay. There's no judgment on that, but it's some people aren't ready to receive it, or they're not there yet to understand, and that's okay.
How do you know they're not ready if you don't have the intuitive power?
Well, yes, you'd have to have the intuitive power.
Do you indiscriminately just say it?
You get a feeling, don't you, oftentimes of who can kind of hold that space for you, even in a non-spiritual sense. Even if you've got a problem and want to go to a friend, you kind of know which friend to go to, right? It's the same thing. You know who to kind of share your experiences with, although it's said not to, if we have spiritual experiences, not actually to share them, because it's kind of throws it into, I don't know, kind of debases it a bit.
Yeah, I think I'll give Priyank the credit on this one, taking note of everything you said, Priyank. This one in particular, he said about it being, you know, these spiritual experiences, you know, that we may have, they're personal. It's like this is a personal relationship that we're building with Guruji and God. And sometimes just, you wouldn't share very personal, intimate moments with your partner, with other people, you know, these special moments necessarily. So why would you do it spiritually? You know, it, like you said, it debases it sort of, it's a bit uncouth in a sense, you know, but
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Frank, you give me that insight.
Thanks. It was good. It was Guruji and the Bible, apparently.
Guruji and the Bible. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like what you just said, Chris, that it really makes it special because it just happened for you. It didn't happen for everybody. It's an intimate moment that you can remember for yourself.
Yeah. And on that note, I hope you all have special moments forevermore with God and all of our listeners as well. Do we have anything else that we'd like to discuss before we go? No shaking heads. Well, thank you so much for such an enjoyable time. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for all the pearls of wisdom.
Thank you,
and
Lauren.
We'll meet again next week to go into part 8. Have a beautiful week, everyone. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.